So thank you, Karin, and hi everyone. I'm excited to be here again this year presenting the IATI Life Science and Health Tech Report. As Karin mentioned, I'm leading the PwC Life Science and Healthcare Health Tech practice, and also leading the team writing this report for the 8th year, together with our partners, first of all, Karin and Yaakov, IATI, the Innovation Authority, and this year with Ion Labs as well, writing a chapter. In the presentation we had just before the break, there was a slide saying good, bad, and the ugly. So I think look at the trends. Karin mentioned we have the good, we have the bad, and I would replace the ugly probably with stability. So I will try to walk you through some of the highlights of the report, just a few slides of what we have, and maybe starting with stability. So looking at the ecosystem, there is stability over the last few years. Thinking about the number of companies, the number of employees, even thinking about the number or looking at the companies established versus companies being closed, we see about the same numbers every year, and I think this is a good sign. We see that even though we have the geopolitical situation with the crisis, with all the difficulties that companies in Israel has, especially startups, we see that the company continues to be stable. We still have the investments. We see even in 2026, we have already in the first quarter more than 12 companies being established, which is about the same pace as we've seen in prior years as well. Same stability, more or less, we see when we look at the subsectors. So there is a slight change and an interesting picture in my mind. If we look at the subsectors, traditionally, the biggest subsector was medical device. It's still the one, but not as big, and the differences are not as significant as it was before. What we do see is a growth in the biomed, which is basically the pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies. What is interesting to see is that while the biomed companies is about just a little bit less than a third, about 30% of the companies in Israel, more than 50% of the employees in the industry, the 81,000 that we've seen, are being employed in this industry. We believe that this is due to the maturity of these companies, the size of them, and the need of more human resources in production, etc. But this is something that we see for the first time, but that is so different between the two. Thinking about the spread, so this is again pretty stable. If you remember, or if you've seen the reports from last year, we think it's pretty much the same. Tel Aviv is the largest one by far with most of the companies. The leading one, it's not only the most and many companies in Tel Aviv, but in each and every subsector, Tel Aviv is the leading city. We do see Rehovot, we see Jerusalem, where the leading sectors are biomed. This is something that is typical. These are cities with research institutions, hospitals, so the biomed companies tend to be there, while the cities in the center of Israel, Tel Aviv, Herzliya, Ra'anana, etc., are more technological, medical device, or digital health. Shifting into investments, the numbers that we all like and very interesting to many of you. So as Karin mentioned, we see a decline, 40% decline in total investment down to 1.6 billion. This is driven both by private investments and mainly by the public market investments. We see that after we had a sort of recovery in 2024, there is a decline back to the levels of 2023. When we look at the first quarter of 2026, pretty much the same. But I would say, I will talk about it later, there's some optimism and looking to a better second half. The decline in private investment wasn't as sharp as it was for the public market. We do see, though, that the deal size, the average deal size, is declining not very sharply. So we see, but we do see a trend, and the trend represents not only the smaller rounds that company has these days, but mainly the stress that companies has, and they are willing to kind of settle on lower valuations, sometimes even going below the valuation of prior rounds, and this is due to the situation. So the more worrying data for me is not necessarily the amount of investments, but the average deal size and what it represents for the small startups. The private market, when we look at the subsectors, biomed is very stable. We see that year over year. And as I think, mentioned last year as well, we see that after the COVID and the hype that was for digital health and sometimes medical device, we see a continuing decline in these subsectors. This is the public sector that we see a huge decline, a very significant one, with a very small activity of IPOs and follow-on offerings. This is a result of, we believe, two trends. One of them, it's more difficult for Israeli companies to raise money. We see that as in the private companies, it's the same for the public ones. The other one is a trend that we see in recent years, and especially this year of public companies having private fundings, private funding, all kind of other investments which are not included here. This includes only, I would say, the more traditional registration statements. So we see companies going for smaller rounds, even though they are public, going to the private market for that, and not necessarily taking the benefit of being public. These are the three top deals that were in 2025. Looking at 2026, there is some optimism. In the first quarter, we had one large fundraising of 33 million. We started seeing smaller ones, and we started seeing companies utilizing again the public platform and not necessarily going for private rounds. M&A, looking a little bit and trying to look at the bright side and optimism. So, and this is there's a slight layout in this slide, and I will explain. First, we see that even though there is a decline, and with all the situation, the health tech industry is still the third one within the Israeli tech ecosystem overall, and it kept going and didn't suffer sometimes as much as others. I'm saying that this is an outlier because it does not include follow-on offering or exit of public companies. And if we would include 89bio in this slide, you could see that there is a huge, huge increase this year compared to prior year. And I think this slide is probably the most optimistic one. We see that there is still interest in companies, in Israeli companies, in innovation. We still see valuation. We still see mega deals. And on top of this, and this is in my mind, optimistic as well, there are dozens of smaller deals that sometimes they are just, $50, $60 million exit, but with a huge return on investments, allowing those companies to keep the activity here in Israel, keep developing. So these are the bigger numbers, but we see a lot of activity in M&As, which sometimes is replacing investments. So we see that as a good sign. This is a slide of the export of medical products. We see again stability, not a huge change. There was 1 year with a significant increase in 2022. Except for that, it's very stable. We don't see a lot of impact of the situation on the export of Israeli products abroad. We spoke a little bit about private funding. We spoke a little bit about IPOs and public funding. And the third leg, I would say, which is as important, especially for startups, is the government support through the Innovation Authority investments. So in 2025, more than 500 million shekels were invested by the Israel Innovation Authorities in companies in Israel. The majority of that went to early stages companies. If we want to see the breakdown, it's pretty different, actually, from what we see in the private market. So the medical device is by far, as it's been in prior years, the largest one getting those grants, with Biomed not being the largest one like we've seen in investment this year. This is probably resulting from the different programs and which company is fitting which, the amounts that they need as the beginning, but we see a lot of investments and a lot of supports in companies, early stages companies by this sector. Lastly, the last slide I want to show, we have a survey with the leading VCs, and I want to show one slide out of the many questions that we had. And this is what they see or what they think the current difficulty in 2026 of life science companies. So funding has always been, there's a slight jump of the numbers, the 74 is funding. It's always been the largest challenge for companies, but we see it's almost a 50% increase of what they think. So 75% of the VCs believe that this is the most challenging thing for companies, for startup companies. We see that this is a reflection of the private investments that we see. So this is something that we look forward to see a change in 2026. There is some optimism when we talk to the VCs, when you talk to CEOs, when you talk to companies. We look at hopefully a brighter second half of 2026 and some change, looking forward to some IPOs in the pipeline. And overall, we do believe that there might be a change and that it's shifting towards a better place. As Karin mentioned, the report has much more information, both on the financial side and also a very long chapter about AI written by Ion Labs and how it's going to change the world in drug development. A lot of other questions and from the survey of the VCs. It will be published Sunday on the IATI website. I encourage everyone to go in and give your feedback. We believe that there is always room for addings, and this can be added. And thank you very much.